Good afternoon, or good evening, or good morning, wherever this finds you. I'm Sean Childs of fantasyanalyst.substack.com. Also started a fantasy football data site, fantasyfootballpaydirt.com, where in my projections and position rankings and a bunch of other cool little tools that I like, hopefully the public does like, are placed, and we'll keep working on that project as we go. I started drafting in early August in the FFPC. I signed up for a slow draft, and it's kind of, when you're getting ready for draft mode, you've done all this research, and now you have to be on the clock and make a decision. I just felt as, because I haven't played in this event this year, I'd like to see the player pool and see how it develops. Give me some more time to think about decisions. I'm never in a hurry in August to put any big money up in a league and, do the high number of injuries. And we've seen a couple last week over the past week. So today is Tuesday. So tomorrow, the NFL 2026 NFL football season starts in 2 weeks. There's a game on Wednesday and Thursday, and then all the live action on Sunday. So on this particular draft, like I said, this is a format. This is the FFPC, which I do not like their rules, and I wrote a whole article on Fantasy Fantasy on SI. Basically, the problem with this format is there's probably three things that stand out. A, they have a bye week in 6 when some teams are on a bye. So when you're playing a full schedule and you got a bye week, it doesn't make sense when week 1, week 2, and week 3, and I think I think just three weeks this year are a bye week. I was thinking maybe 4, but also the Thanksgiving week is typically everybody plays. In this particular case, is week 12. So I think it would be important to have an all play in a week that everybody's healthy. And I think because of this format and the high stakes market generally will have drafts after the early games, it's almost a free look. It's better to not do the free all play if you're going to have one of them in week 1, because it's kind of gimmicky where people are drafting points and records kind of important. So, week 2 or week 3 would be more fair, or even I would think beginning of the season would be better because more players would be hopefully be healthy, and you got a fair shot of putting a full roster. Where if you did it Thanksgiving week, which typically is week 13, it's week 12 this year, it's a little different. But and the second part is they run their fantasy football championships in weeks 13 and 14. And because Thanksgiving is a week early, there's 4 teams off in week 13 this year, and there's 2 teams off in week 14. So now in order to make this championship round, you have to either have the most points or best record in the regular season, and you're automatically in. For the 3rd and 4th place teams, you have to win in the playoffs both weeks, and a 3rd team can get in the postseason, which I'm okay with that. But I think a more fair way would be to do it is, because of the bye weeks, and if they don't want to change your schedule, is maybe have, in week 13, if teams 3 and 4 win, one of those teams advances to the next round. So only one of them, if they both happen to play and they're going to play in happen to win in week 13 and they're going to play in week 14, just the winner advances. So that way, at least you get a 3rd team in there. I think it would be a little bit of progression in the game. And the other small rub is that all the other high stakes leagues have kind of switched to team kickers. And I think it's not so much probably in the season that's a factor, but when you're trying to get into the championship round, it's a little longer run, and kickers sometimes get hurt. You're better off, you don't want to carry 2 kickers on a roster with a 20-man roster. So it's a little tricky there. So, but fix your rules. This event was originally for the players, by the players was their logo, and I don't think that they stick to that motto. And but that's a different rub, and it's documented if you want to go find it, and it is what it is. And so anyway, so in this format, tight ends are worth 1.5, so they really get pushed up. Quarterbacks tend to get really kind of discounted, where the NFFC, they might take their second quarterbacks relatively early because they want to have strength. But you'll see that this one, you can kind of wait a little longer because, having a good tight end is important. And sometimes having a good tight end, second tight end is a good to have an insurance just because the value of the player. And that equation is a whole different lesson and stuff like that from playing it, and I don't want to get too deep into that, but I will talk about it when I'm drafting players. So at the same time, it has 2 flexes, 2 running backs, and 2 wide receivers. So you can play 4 running backs, and I think the NFFC doesn't do this. And I've talked to Greg Ambrosius multiple years about this. I think it's a progression of the game. I think somebody can have a wide receiver injury and they get punished. If they have an extra running back on the bench, they can't get them in a lineup, or even if they had a really, 2 or 3 good tight ends, just the guys that could get 10, 11 points that you could put in your roster rather sticking in, a really weak wide receiver and stuff like that. But anyways, so by having 2 flexes for wide receivers, these teams will have the ability to play 4 running backs. So that changes the running back position dynamics a little bit. And they can play 3 tight ends. So some teams will, get Brock Bowers if he slid, and McBride. I don't know if they would ever go together this year, but I did another draft and I saw Brock Bowers and Loveland get drafted. And, sometimes teams will take 3rd one because if they can, get a bunch of catches and score a lot of touchdowns, it is helpful. And if you want to see the pass scoring of that, I'll just go to the tab just to kind of show you just a reference point of it. If I can get my mouse to work up there. There you go. There you go. So on this weekly fantasy points, you can look at the previous history of, the FFPC and just if you want to look at tight ends, last year, McBride scored 378 points, Pitts 254, 231. And you go back to, Brock Bowers over 300. McBride again was solid. Ingram 291. So you can see the values of these numbers in previous seasons for comparisons, and which is helpful, especially if you're crossing over this event. And then you can kind of just back into the wide receivers in the PPR format to see what the comparisons are. And then, mentally you have to kind of put your mental spin on what you believe that player will do and where he goes in drafts. And that's the tricky part, because you don't necessarily have to take, early tight end, but you kind of want to get a sense where you think the value is and catch a drop off. But you can every season, and I think it happened last year, there is like a tight end that gets drafted in probably I think last year it was Pitts. He was like a 10th to 12th rounder in this format, and he ended up being the 2nd highest scorer. So you can find that each year. And I think there's one that I think Fannin was a guy that, emerged off the waiver wire and people spent $300. So just something to think about. So anyways, again, this is a slow draft, 4-point passing touchdowns for quarterbacks. So they'll be a little bit different than the NFFC. First pick, going into this draft, I had picked 9, which is kind of like, it's in a tricky situation where you kind of miss the front part of the draft. And I think there's 7 good players that I'd be interested in. I went into it saying that I wasn't going to take McCaffrey. I was going to avoid the injury risk. I'm going to have more drafts. Prefer to get him at a discount, see what's going on. And we're in August, and he's, got something minor going on. And a couple of years ago, we had a couple things we thought were minor, and he really didn't even play all season. So I ended up being a complete bust and a waste of a draft pick. And he was getting drafted 1st overall for most of the summer. So anyways, but McCaffrey went 6th overall here, normal draft flow. And I don't want to get too much into the draft flow. I just want to more talk about the decisions on the team, because I'm going to do multiple of these in a row today, because I did do a fast one of these last night, and I did the RT Sports one, and I do have an FFWC Circa Championship that I didn't do, but I can look at it and I will reflect on that, just a little bit of difference of the game. So I think that's kind of important. So in the first round, I went in, I was thinking I wouldn't mind having Brock Bowers on a team, and his ADP in this shows it's around 8, but he went 3rd overall over Jamar Chase and Puka. Kind of interesting. Those guys have little proven resumes, good quarterbacks, and, high scoring teams. And Bowers, he can score 300 points, but can he score 370? So we'll see if that ends up being a win or loss. So because I was going to go with a tight end, I took McBride. And this is, I fell right into the trap right away. I take McBride. Yeah, I want a tight end. But, you're all giddy to draft, but he has bye week 14. So now I'm up against it. So I have one of my better players on a bye week where I might have to win that match to get to the championship round. So you can always get there in advance. So I can't say you want to fade them, but it's something to be aware of, not to have too many of them. And so anyways, but I went with a tight end, came back. Running backs went pretty heavy from, pick 11 all the way through the second round midway. Only 2 wide receivers got taken, Jefferson and Lamb. I took James Cook, a little bit of talk that he's going to get a few more catches this year. I just went with a theory. I'm just looking for, trying to lean into some players that play in offenses that are going to be higher scoring. And Buffalo scored, I believe, 30 rushing touchdowns last year, and the quarterback will snipe plenty. Cook's a pretty good player, so I went with him. Hopefully he can have a few more touchdowns and a few more catches. Is he better than Chase Brown? Probably in scoring. Chase Brown probably plays in a better opportunistic offense where, he's going to get more catches and some passing touchdowns. But, Cincinnati doesn't score a lot of touchdowns. Barkley, I think he's a pretty good value. I'm really not in the Devon Achane camp this year just because I don't like the Miami offense. He'll probably get his catches and be fine. I'm just not sure if the touchdowns will be there. But anyways, so I went with the high-scoring offense, took Cook. Came back to me. I really wanted to Rashee Rice. I really think that it's a guy that can potentially score 100 catches, get well over 1,000 yards, and score double-digit touchdowns is the ideal profile you're looking for, especially in like a third round of a draft. I mean, if you started with, let's see, Puka Nacua and Drake London, Olave, and some of these other structures at wide receiver, it's kind of an advantage if you can hit on the running back position. But he went before me. I had to make a decision. Had Zay Flowers, yet had a good finish the last year. Kind of think of him as more of a possession guy. Doesn't get a lot of goal line chances. Baltimore would rather run it in there, but I just said, all right, I'm just going to go for the consistency factor. Hopefully, I get that. If I was going to choose a receiver, I would have taken Tat McMillan, who I end up getting in the next round. I like Smith, but that team likes to run the ball. It was a little nicked up at the time when I was doing it. And Abuka, I like him as well, but he had something going on with his toe, so I kind of backed off of him. And McLaurin, kind of neutral on him, like the other guy player. So, Flowers, if he could score 7 or 8 touchdowns, be awesome. If he catches 90 balls, that would be really impressive. And probably the lean for me on him is that, the tight end position isn't as strong with Baltimore as it hasn't been in the past. So I think Flowers will have a pretty good opportunity. Hopefully Lamar Jackson bounces back and that offense, rebounds. They scored a lot of touchdowns. Lamar was just a beast 2 years ago, scored like 480 fantasy points in these type of formats. So McMillan, he was getting drafted in as a wide receiver too in the second round in a lot of drafts, or early third round last season. And he ended up being the 15th best wide receiver, 70 catches, I believe 1,014 yards, 7 touchdowns. Nice player, but he only had one impact game, and he didn't have really too many games that he scored more than 15 fantasy points. So I think the luster, with Carolina passing, game and stuff like that, and the quarterback play, their quarterback threw, I think, at least 8 times under 200 yards. It really cramped the upside of their wide receivers. So, but I think that he can make a progression. If that's what he did last year, I think he would get a little bit better. Maybe he could get to like 9 touchdowns and 80 catches and 1,100 yards. So he fit the profile I'm looking for. T. Higgins is probably the best player as far as like he gives the double-digit touchdowns. He can get over 1,000 yards. He can catch 80 passes. But the dig with him is that since something always happens in Cincinnati, and he doesn't seem like he can stay on the field for a full season. So in this draft, I didn't fight for him, and I went a different direction. I came back with DJ Moore, same reason as Cook. I think he should be a pretty good pick, fit with Buffalo. His ADP has moved up. I'm not sure that he was wide receiver 25 in this draft. I would think that he would move up earlier than this. The player I would have taken at running back was Price. I think that he was a player of interest, but I thought Moore was kind of an advantage. And Price had kind of an ADP on the turn. So when you're not used to doing a format, you got to make a decision of seeing what's in that queue and not knowing the draft flow the first time. And then after you do a couple of them, you can see where people are moving them around. And the ADPs aren't as easy to see in this format unless you subscribe to, I think it's a Fantasy Mojo guy. You can see that stuff a little bit better. But the NFFC, you can pretty much see at any time what is going on with their ADPs, and the players are going up and down. So you can maybe time it a little better. But I was okay with Moore. I gambled that Price might make it back. I was okay with Warren. So when it gets back to the 6th round, I really have in my projections, I have RJ Harvey projected well above everybody else. And I really went through it a lot. I think, J.K. Dobbins has some injury risk, doesn't catch a lot of balls. He's a good player on the field, and he will get his rushing attempts. And the third string, Jonah Coleman, has a lot of upside. But I think Harvey caught 47 balls last year. He had a pretty good opportunity at the end of the year because of injuries. But I gave him just like a 15% increase in overall opportunity, maybe 8 more catches and a few more carries. But I did give him respect for the touchdowns. He scored 12 last year. I think he'll get some rushing chances. He's kind of fast and, can make some big plays. Does have a little injury risk in his college career. I think he had a torn ACL early on, so he's not like a slam dunk to stay healthy. But anyways, I wanted to on the clock, and I called my good friend Kimmer Slicer, and I said, first-time caller, long-time listener, are you a fan of Jonathan Brooks? I was neutral on him because of his, missing 2 seasons, injury risk. He has talent, but, you missed 2 seasons and you're, putting a bet on this league. The first entry for this league is $2,200. Second is, if you enter a second team, it's $1,600. So you're putting big money on this type of entry, and you're going to, do you want to take the risk? I don't want to handicap him. Handcuff him with Hubbard. So anyway, I was kind of tunnel vision on the running back position. So I take Brooks, and then the next pick is Devontae Adams. I'm like, well, you're a dumbass, because realistically, Adams, to me, I still think he can play. He can score touchdowns at a wide receiver 4. He is kind of an advantage. Now I've taken a rookie a third-year running back that's, hasn't played. I think I should have taken the wide receiver and taken the chance that, maybe Harvey makes it back to me. And if you just look at the draft flow here, if I don't take Brooks, maybe he goes to the Harvey guy, and maybe and Harvey backs to me. But I don't know that, and I made the decision. But Brooks does has upside, so, what can I do? You got to go past it. So I went with Metcalf coming back. He's been pretty much a top 25 receiver most of his career. I think the change in coaching staff should help him a little bit. There was a couple of options there. Brian Thomas was a player of interest. Marvin Harrison was a player of interest. I was off Pierce and Downs, just not enough scoring for me. Godwin's, a nice player, scoring kinds of factor there. But I think Metcalf, he could potentially score more touchdowns. He's coming off a couple of down years, and hopefully he bounces back. But he fits as a wide receiver 4. But I'm at the mercy of how I can get out at the running back position. And I don't think I did a good job as far as the structure of this. But I did I'll do another one of these FFPC drafts. And I think the decisions were better, and I like the potential anyway. So I came back, everybody's on Blake Corum, the upside, Williams is going to fade and whatever, but Corum came on. But the problem with him is he's not really a playable third running back in many weeks unless he scores a touchdown. Even if he gets 40, 50 yards and a catch or something, he needs that touchdown to get 11 points. So he's going to be kind of like a upside RB3, but not playable. So that's why I come back in the next round and take Rachaad White, because he's the best pass catching back in that offense. They got 2 other guys that are similar that could potentially carry the ball on early downs. It looks a bit cloudy. The rest of running backs, Gainwell, pass catcher, but I like Bucky Irvin, and the rest of them, the Kyle Monagai of the Bears, he got a little nicked up afterwards. And also on the factor of the RJ Harvey thing, by the time after I took Brooks and the gentleman took Harvey in this draft, Dobbins got a little soft tissue issue, and so that news was out there. So the spotlight was on Harvey a little bit more than it maybe should have. And this draft was 6 hours, and a lot of these drafters when you got preseason stuff going on, these guys wait for news because anything can happen in practice. So, they kind of be careful. So you don't really want to do a 6-hour draft if you're really in a hurry and you're staring at the draft board and stuff like that. But that was also a factor. So anyways, it comes back to me. I take Rachaad White, pass catching back. Talk about his mistake with him later on. Woody Marks was favorable. Not a cross-key merit guy. Just think that Allen's is comparable to him. Tracy, kind of can catch the ball, just didn't jump out. White, at least he's done it before. He will get some, maybe 100 carries. He could get 40, 50 passes. I got him put over 50. Just need the quarterback in that offense to throw the running back a little bit more, but they didn't have a pass catching back in the last couple of years with Daniels there. Come back and I take, I was interested in Michael Williams. I was interested in Pittman. Wendell Robinson was kind of neutral to me because of the scoring and the offense. Didn't like him. But, I also had Metcalf, so Pittman might not appear there. But Michael Wilson, I think I would have taken him if he made it to me. Really came on last year. He showed he could, score at the goal line, get a lot of catches. The offense should be better. But with Harrison back on the field and a good tight end and a better running back, it could get a little cloudy. But he was worth the gamble as a wide receiver 5. I went with Jaden Reed. Kind of an inconsistent player from week to week, capable of some big games. Scored, I think, 199 points a couple of years ago in 217, I think, in his rookie season. The Packers will let him run the ball a little bit. He gets drafted. I think he's the third. No, maybe Golden went after him. But, I think that he's more of like a possession, can make some plays. And everybody's drafting who's it, running back for wide receiver? Christian Watson. They're really fighting for him. And I think he had a lot of talent, can make big plays, but he's kind of a, more of a 4-catch guy per week. We haven't seen him be like a 7 catches, double-digit target guy. I think he does have talent, but he's been hurt. So can he stay healthy? Maybe. But Reed had kind of a fluky foot injury last year, had a shoulder issue in week 1. The shoulder issue required surgery, had the foot fixed. So the shoulder injury actually helped him, but it ended up being a wasted season. But I think he's a guy that scored 200 fantasy points. So whereas Jordan Addison had double-digit touchdowns first 2 years, change of quarterback, I think he's comparable. I'm not going to Concepcion playing with Cleveland. I'm not going to jump on him. Higgins was okay, but then he ended up getting hurt. Worthy obviously plays with Mahomes. So there's some pretty good options. Like I said, I'm describing a 9-10 round of some better options than you might get in the NFFC. And it depends on who you like and, actually and whoever does the best at the end of the year, if your team actually gels and gets to the postseason. So because I've been a RJ Harvey guy, I've pretty much been saying if I get Harvey, I want to take Jonah Coleman because I can get insurance. But if Dobbins gets hurt, I could have both backs and Coleman could be, a good part of Dobbins with a little pass catching upside too. So it could be like, not that you're going to play both of them, but you kind of have that backfield covered a little bit better. But so I went with him in the 11th round. I thought it was fair. The gentleman here took Bigsby in the 11th. I probably would have handcuffed him there instead of there, but I mean, not everybody was doing it. So I came back, come out of the corner. I'd waited till the 12th round to get a quarterback. And like I said, by the time I picked there, I'm in the 12th round taking a quarterback, and I take the 12th quarterback. And on my projections, I have Bo Nix projected 4th, and I have Kyler Murray projected 6th. So both of those quarterbacks in my mind fit as upside QB2s. If I cheat it down, I'm at the mercy of, hopefully help building this roster in a better way at running back or wide receiver. In this case, I was probably, because I didn't get that third running back, I felt I needed to get more upside at third good running back. I thought I had to get more upside of like the backup running back and potentially handcuff type option. So anyway, so I take Bo Nix, a player I like, thought about Jackson Dart. I like him a lot too, but in the end, I stuck to my projections. I just think that he scored 33 and 29 touchdowns. He was, flashy at the end of his rookie season last year, he kind of faded. I know he got coming off an injury, he got hurt in the playoffs, but last year was a little more boring, but the numbers weren't that far off. And I think he finished 7th and 8th in quarterback scoring over the last 2 years. And I get the 12th quarterback, and he has beat that back-to-back years. And they added Jalen Waddle to make him a better player, to give him another option this year. And I do like their 3rd and 4th wide receivers as well. So there's a lot of talent to spread the ball there. So coming back to me, I had to, take a handcuff here. So I took Ray Davis with my James Cook hookup. And because of the format came back, I really looked at this. I was like, because I have Knicks, should I take another backup quarterback? And if I would have taken it, was between Kyler Murray and Goff, or should I take the drop off at tight end? Because if McBride has an issue and I wait much longer, I'm going to get killed at the tight end position with its 1.5 points per catch. And I think Hawkinson he's averaged like the last 6 years, like over 11 fantasy points per game, which is, that's 180 for a season if he stays healthy. He's coming off a year where he came into it injured, missed some time. The quarterback play was horrible. The offensive line gave City 60 sacks. And, you bring in Kyler Murray, who likes to dink and dunk sometimes. So Hawkinson should have a rebound and catches. So I think that he is a clear soft spot in this type of range, in this format, if you're going to cheat the second tight end position. So I was like, you know what? The drop off is more at the tight end position. So I'm going to take him. I'll gamble on the quarterback position, and we'll see what happens for the running back depth. So it goes all the way out. I take Hawkinson, a couple of tight ends, 3 go, but come back to me. Somebody takes Kyler Murray, and Jared Goff should have been the next quarterback taken. He's, been a top 6 quarterback in, Detroit has a high scoring offense, but the guy took Daniel Jones, which is fine. So I got Goff. So I got a much better quarterback than I expected. I got a guy that, potentially play better at home. And if Denver has some matchups I don't like, I think I can play him. So I think I did well at that position for cheating it. Then I came back out of that turn in round 16. And this is where I probably made the mistake that looking back at it, is that because I had Rashad White, and I'm not a Crosby Merritt guy, I like Nicholas Singleton better than Katron Allen, because I think that he could be the goal line back. He could catch a few balls, and I think Spears has injury risk. So I like him as more upside as the messy situation in Washington, where Allen, I think, could get the leads carries at some point in the season. I don't think he's going to get a ton of catches unless something happened to White. But if White had an injury, they wouldn't throw it enough. So, but if I had White and him together, I felt like a little bit better. But I went with the player I liked the most, and I would have taken Allen on the next pick, and he ended up going. And you can just see when you're looking at the queue at the running back position. I mean, these queues in these leagues are pretty much caddies for people, and they just pop up there. So he gets taken, and then Najee Harris. It was right around he signed during this draft, and I really looked at it close. I hadn't updated the projections yet after I took Singleton, but I did do the projections for week 1, and I did a little more research. I looked at it, him, and I was like, you know what? He is going to be more of in a split for the Giants. Scatterbo is kind of a wild card for me. What's his name there? The other running back. I had to go back up. Tracy is, a pass catcher, played well last year. I can't disrespect him, what he's done, but, Harris has gained over 1,000 yards 3 or 4 times. Can score touchdowns, will catch some passes. So I went for the split in the Giants situation based on who was left. Came back, took New England defense, got the early game. My thought was to take a second defense because you get the free look. But in the end, I took Keyshawn Boutte. I just figured New England, based on the wide receiver, I hadn't taken a wide receiver in, 8 rounds or so. I just take a shot with him in New England. He ended up getting traded after I made the pick to Houston. And that's actually probably helps his value a little bit. Maybe he's a 55 catch receiver. We'll see what happens. Kind of messy there. I think it hinges on if Tank Dell what happens with him. And I didn't fight for the kicker. And this draft has you can see, right, what are these guys going to pick, a kicker or defense, or whatever the player, and the clock's still at 4 hours for one team left. So I came back with Richard. He scored 170 points last year as a top 5 or 6 kicker. He has a big leg, but there's like six kickers that have big legs. Cameron Dicker, Cam Little, obviously Brandon Aubrey gets drafted in the 12th round because he's been great. Fairburn gets drafted because of volume last year, and he did make a lot more 50-yard kicks. The Rams kicker looks better. The Packers quick kicker looks better. So I think the kicker thing is, I don't want to be a micromanager, but I took the kicker that I think gets undervalued, and I think even the Detroit kicker has a little more value. So in the end, I think that I did okay. I would prefer, if you ask me right now, if I could have switched Brooks for Harvey, I probably would have taken it because I got the handcuff. And maybe if I've taken Allen if Allen made it to me instead of Najee Harris, it would be a little bit better. I think overall, the wide receiver position is pretty good. I got the edge at tight end. I got competitive options at quarterback. It's just a matter of, can I negotiate the RB2 position, and do I have enough for the bye weeks if I have to play other running backs to, score enough points? And I have 4 players on bye week 7. And the only other player that I end up getting Zay Flowers. And when same thing, I took him with McBride. He was head by week 13, which is 4 off that week. So it's kind of a negative there. So I took 2 hits on the playoff. So, if I had a tiebreaker, if you really like 2 players the same, I probably would have went another direction. But so that's what I did on that team. And, what are you going to do? You're at the mercy of the draft flow. You got more time to think about it. But the next draft I'm going to show you for the FFPC, I'm on the clock and it's fast moving. And it was at 11:30 last night. And I will walk through that. And I think it was a little bit better decision making. And we'll see what's happening. But thanks for your time.